and gentlemen, and once again we're very sorry for the slight delay that we had. Welcome back, and this is the third time that we're seeing you in the day for this third and very special session. This is called The Broken Columns, launch of The Vanishing Homes of India by T.S. Nagarajan, followed by a conversation with Dayanita Singh, and the moderator for this particular session would be Manju Rajan. To speak a little about Manju Rajan, she is the editor of Architectural Digest in India. And this is not among one of those days when an anchor actually introduces the panelist on stage. So we give the liberty to Manju Rajan to kindly come up and give the introduction. But I take a little liberty to introduce Manju Rajan. Rajan has spent almost a decade in media industry in India, working with newspapers and magazines including Vogue. Her work in the last few years has focused chiefly on chronicling the art and design market in the country. And now I leave the session up to the moderator for the day. Give a big round of applause for Manju Rajan.
Good afternoon, everybody. So, in case you're wondering, I'm Manju Rajan. So I'm really proud to be associated with this book because, you know, it's been a couple of years in the making, I believe, and it's been part of a lot of people really following something with a great deal of passion. And photojournalist T.S. Nagarajan's Vanishing Homes of India especially calls out, it's very important for us from our magazine point of view because these kinds of homes are really quite unique, and a lot of them have already vanished, as it were. And getting a book published on this theme was a long-held dream for him, and in his autobiography he talks about how he attempted to do it once, but there were no publishers forthcoming to do it. So the fact that it has actually happened, and the fact that we now have this book here, is really the result of a great deal of effort by particularly two former colleagues of his from the Taj magazine, Geeta Simawayas and Umaima Mullah Feroz, and of course Brinda Samaya and Hekar, which actually published the book. So I'd like to ask Umaima to come up on stage and present the first copy to Dayanita now. So before Dayanita and I go through the selection of pictures that she selected from Nagarajan's book, I'd like to give you a small introduction to the man that is T.S. Nagarajan. He was born in 1932. He grew up in Mysore. He spent more than 30 years in Delhi before retiring and moving to Bangalore with his wife. When he retired, after his retirement is really when he started this project. And T.S. Nagarajan is actually, he's the younger brother of T.S. Satyan. And he began his career with a battered hand-me-down Argoflex camera that was taken from T.S. Satyan. He joined the Indian government as its official photographer, I think, in 1956, and later became the picture editor of Yojana. And he says in his book that it's actually during his time with Yojana that he started to travel around the country. His editor at that time was Kushwant Singh, and they traveled around the country, and he that was the first time he actually saw the different kinds of cultures and the influence of these various cultures that went into the architecture of each of these states. And he illustrated This India, which was a book for children. And in addition to all of that, he also edited a number of picture books. Now, the project that is the result, that went into the creation of this book spanned 20 years, and it began in 1962. Now, there's a little bit, sorry. Dayanita will show you some pages from the book. Okay. So there's a little bit of a backstory about how he started and how he became interested in homes. While he was living in Delhi, Nagarajan studied music with an expert called Mani Iyer. And many years after Mani Iyer died, Nagarajan went to his hometown in Tamil Nadu, and that was really the first home he photographed. And he was so taken in by the interiors of that house and the poor Brahmin family that lived in it that he had this idea for this project. Have we found it? Okay. Yeah, could we dim the lights?
But the fear is that you will fall asleep.
Just do it with the page down key, but
Yeah, you know what? I'll just
Randomly.
just keep clicking. Okay, all right. There you go. Okay. That might become a permanent thing after this. So as I was saying, so he actually started with Mani Iyer's house in Tamil Nadu, and South India was really, the first region that he started with. So the book follows his journey. So it doesn't follow any other sort of order. It follows the order of his journeys at that time. So he started in South India, so you get Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka. The book ends with Goa. And he basically, so for 20 years, he traveled around the country with his wife, Meenakshi, who he calls his assistant on this project. And the book is actually dedicated to her. And it was a completely self-funded project, and it only looked at traditional homes around the country. Now, normally for an occasion like this, you'd have the author of the work speak about his work. But Nagarajan has been ill for quite a few years now, and he's 81 now. And he could not be here, but I thought that it's important to listen to the genesis of this project through his own voice. So what I'm going to do is just read out a little portion about how he started on this project from his autobiography. So it's actually a section in his book. It's called The Echoing Interior, The Story of My Photo Odyssey. The Indian home became the center of my interest at a certain stage in my career as a photojournalist. I began my photo odyssey in search of old homes. The result was my much acclaimed photographic project, a definitive documentation of interiors of century-old homes in India and the engagement of art with life. For over a decade, I wandered, accompanied by my wife, Meenakshi, who helped as my unfailing assistant over a large part of the country in my quest for old homes. The homes I have photographed are all lived-in homes with at least a flicker of life in them. They are around a century old. I have left out palaces and public buildings, for they were built with different considerations in mind. A home is built for an individual and his family. It reflects his relationship with society at large and the style of life of the period. Many of the homes of the kind I photographed have been demolished, some for their wood and others because the owners could not afford the maintenance. The urban demand for aged artifacts has accelerated the process. The most difficult part of the project, he says, was the identification of suitable homes and the research it entailed, because I had no sponsors, no institution behind me. Photography inside lived-in homes also meant an invasion of privacy for those who lived in them. But once the sincerity of the purpose behind the project was explained, most Indian families generously opened their doors. The task became more difficult since I did not look for pretty pictures. I looked for homes whose interiors had something to say regarding the lifestyle of their times. The effort has been most satisfying. The pages that follow contain the story of this project, which I wrote in the year 2000 based on the journal I kept long after I finished working on the project. although the travel was done not continuously but over a period of 20 years. The first home I photographed was in 1962 in Tanjavur. So much time has elapsed, he writes, since I visited the homes, and now many homes have perished, and so many I met who warmly welcomed me into their homes have passed away. This makes it difficult for me to update the report, which I feel serves as a mirror in words to the lifestyle of the period and supplements much I haven't been able to convey in my photographs. So this was written in the year 2000 while he was writing his autobiography. Of course, that is the author's point of view on the book. But I would just like to mention here that this is a book that's really important for us, the general reader, the layperson, because as the title of the book so clearly puts it, these are the vanishing homes of India. Today, most of them don't exist. When we put together houses for our magazine, I mean, out of 100 odd houses that we've looked at over the last 2 years, there's been barely a handful that are actually living, maintained heritage homes. I'd say even less than really one handful of these places really exist, because obviously they're very expensive to maintain and people's lifestyles have changed quite a lot. But as Nagarajan says, these homes were more than just a living space. He thought of them as the embodiment of a tradition, and he has also said that he was interested in looking at homes, especially old ones, and how their occupants live in them. Because he was curious to see how people relate and live in houses they get built for themselves. Because a house, he says, is after all not just an independent identity. It is an emotional and a social being of infinite benevolence and power. So he was very conscious of the fact that the houses would disappear before long, and I think that really his book is a very important addition and a very important slice of a recording of our social and cultural history in India. And of course, Nagarajan had his favorites. He loved the South Indian homes. He, especially because of the detail involved, it was also part of his own culture. The Calcutta homes, he was a little bit, I don't know if you can see it here. Yeah, so that's there. So the Calcutta homes he was a bit ambivalent about, because he said that the residents of these homes seemed incongruous in comparison to the architecture, because a lot of them followed Western modes of decor and interiors and accessories. Now, one of Nagarajan's long-time admirers is Dainita Singh, who, of course, as most of you know, is one of the foremost photo artists of our time. And in addition to an outstanding body of photographic work, she's also published 10 books. In fact, Dainita has said before that I photograph to make books. So, and Dainita presented Germany most recently in the last Venice Biennale, and among her works was the File Room book displayed on the wall. Her latest exhibition opened in October to fantastic reviews in London. It was called Go Away Closer, where she premiered the Museum Bhavan, which is her own way of looking at photo architecture, as it will. And there's a certain resonance between the work that Dainita is doing and the work that Nagarajan has done, because it's not really just about the photo itself. It's about the architecture of the photo. It's about what is unsaid as much as what is said. So I think it's fantastic, and we're so glad that Dainita agreed to be part of this session. And so Dainita has picked a series of images that have special meaning to her, and I will give the floor over to Dainita.
No, I'll do that myself. If you look closely at this photograph, the shadows that are going over the cane. And if you look long enough, sorry? Can you put off all the lights? Those lights, they're asking the lights to be. Everyone here? So just during the time that the lights are turned off, if you look closely at this photograph and look at the windows, I'll just do it for you. If you look closely at the light and look very closely at how it's falling on the cane and the beam of light at the back, and you keep looking at it and you really make yourself still, I promise you, you will feel the light, the shadow change in the room, because these photographs are not still photographs. You can experience what that light must do in another few minutes, what it did in a few minutes before. This is how I look at his work. I can sort of imagine, I can feel the temperature in his photographs. I can feel the time of day. And in some of the photographs, I can hear the sound. And these are not things that one would look to photography for the sound and to watch the light grow. I think Nagarajan is not really a still photographer. There is a lot more that happens in the frame than what we think might comprise the photograph. And a lot of that has to do with what he leaves out of the picture, what is outside the frame.